ربيع تبادى بهذه الصدور وعمر تنادى بها أحلى شعور.
So this morning we were discussing some ways we can benefit from these last 10 nights, inshallah. And one of the suggestions that came from one of the brothers, he said that why don't we do some kind of historical study or something like that, something along those lines. So one thing that came to mind was a historical study, or actually a hadith study on Al-Quds and Masjid Al-Aqsa and the surrounding areas, and inshallah to learn. Well, there's a very beautiful collection of 40 hadith basically about Masjid Al-Aqsa and the surrounding areas that I found. I've been teaching this to my 12th grade students for the last 2 months almost, and it's a very beautiful collection. I think they just finished it this year in February, actually 2021. And I think this is very important because something that if you look on YouTube, if you look on the internet, not much work has been done in regards to this. And there's a lot of significant events that happened in and around those areas, and continuing to happen in the current period, and will happen in the future. So it's very important for us to understand these things and understand significance of that area, inshallah, so we can we can have the love of that and inculcate that in our lives, inshallah ta'ala. So inshallah we'll start with the ayah of Surah Al-Isra, ayah number 1. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawla linuriyahu min ayatina innahu huwa as-sami'u al-basir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that praise or glory be to the one, alladhi asra bi'abdihi, the one who took at night, the night journey of the Prophet ﷺ. He's the abd that is mentioned here, when he went from Makkah Mukarramah to Jerusalem, from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Haram in Jerusalem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, min al-Masjid al-Haram il Masjid al-Aqsa alladhi barakna hawla, the one that we have blessed its surrounding areas. So not just Baytul Maqdis, not just Masjid al-Aqsa itself is blessed, but even the surrounding areas is blessed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says so that we can show him from our signs, innahu huwa as-sami'u al-basir, verily he is the one all hearing, all seeing. The Prophet ﷺ says in one of the hadith, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وَلَنِعْمَ الْمُصَلَّى هُوَ, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, and how beautiful of a musalla, of an area of worship, a place of worship it is. And he's referring to Masjid al-Aqsa, Baytul Maqdis. So this is a collection of 42 hadith, and it's revolving around Masjid al-Aqsa, like I said earlier. One thing I really liked, and I wanted to mention this inshallah before we start, is the intention. So we know innamal a'mal bin niyat, that whenever we start anything, we have to fix our intention. While doing the action, we fix our intention again, ask ourselves why we're doing the action, and then even after we have finished, go back and think about why you did the action, why you did that thing. So this is a very beautiful intention that they included in this book. It's not from the collector of the hadith itself. It's actually from a scholar from Yemen, from Hadramaut, Imam Sayyid Abdullah ibn Alawi al-Haddad, rahimahullah. And this says he passed away in 1720. So about 300 years, actually. 300 years he passed away. And this beautiful niyyah that he makes, intention that he makes, he says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, nawaytu at-ta'allum wa at-ta'lim wa at-tadhakkur والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير وابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه وسبحانه وتعالى. In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, the compassionate. All praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower salutations and greetings upon our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his family and companions. I intend to study and teach. Ta'lim wa ta'allum wa ta'lim. To take and give a reminder. To take and give benefit. To take and give advantage. To encourage the holding fast to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way of his messenger. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower salutations and greetings upon him. Calling to guidance and directing towards good, hoping for the countenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his pleasure, proximity and reward. Glorified and blessed be he. Ameen. So very beautiful niyyah again. The way he put it together I really enjoyed reading that, and that's something we should try to maybe memorize, inshallah. And whenever we're doing some action, or whenever we're doing something, we should try to use that, inshallah. So basically, Masjid al-Aqsa, the word Masjid al-Aqsa comes in the Quran, and this masjid is actually referred to, and that land is referred to in the Quran multiple times. And the word Aqsa itself, it means from a far away place. So Masjid al-Aqsa, the furthest place, the furthest masjid. That's basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to, Masjid al-Aqsa or Masjid al-Bayt al-Muqaddas in the Quran. Now, like I said earlier, there's very important events that happened in the past. Okay, so for example, when you had Musa alayhi and the people of Banu Israel, when they were first ordered to go to that land, when they were first ordered to go and enter into Jerusalem, and the people of Banu Israel refused to do so, because there was the Qawm Jabbarun, there was the people who were Amalekites, if I'm saying Amalekites, I think is how to say it. They were living in that city, and they were a very strong people. And the Banu Israel, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding them, and they have a prophet, they have Musa alayhi salam with them, commanding them to go and enter into the city, they refused to do so, and they said that Inna hahuna qa'idun, you go, Musa is referring to Musa alayhi salam, they said, you go with your Lord and fight these people. We're going to sit here and wait for you to open the city, and then we'll come and we'll join you. Because of this disrespect and the way they answered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused them yatihun, they were lost in the desert for 40 years. 40 years they were not able to enter into the blessed city, and Musa alayhi himself was not able to enter with him. We'll talk about that later on, inshallah, a little bit more in detail. But 40 years they did that. And one of the things the ulama say about this is basically 40 years is a whole generation. So you have the people who were living under the servitude of Fir'aun and his torturing and all the stuff that he was doing to them, and they had this fear in their heart. Even though Allah subhanahu showed them the miracle of drowning Fir'aun right in front of them, and they had Musa alayhi salam, a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with them, but they still had this fear in them. They didn't have that strong iman. So a whole generation of them had to live in the desert, and the younger generation grew up in the desert until they were old enough, and then they got old enough, and Musa alayhi salam actually passed away, and Yusha bin Nun alayhi salam, the prophet after him, he led the new generation, the young generation. He himself is one of the young people. You guys have read Surah Kahf, we read that every Friday. The child or the servant that is mentioned, who's traveling with Musa alayhi salam to go and meet Khidr alayhi salam, that's Yusha bin Nun. Yusha alayhi salam, he's the one who grew up, he became a prophet, and then he led the people and they conquered Jerusalem. So this is that's where the history starts, from Jerusalem, and then the Muslims, the mu'mineen of that time, the believers of that time, entered into Jerusalem. And then after that you have, for example, Dawood alayhi salam, where he's the leader, the representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth. And then Sulaiman alayhi salam after him, and the building of the Temple Mount, the temple of Sulaiman alayhi salam, the masjid that he built there. Then you have the way later, there's a lot of things that happen in between where the Christian kings came and they took over Jerusalem, and as punishment to the Jews, they actually killed many of them. They took them as slaves. They destroyed the temple of Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, and they used it as a garbage dump. Okay, we know that these kind of things happen throughout the history. And then in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the famous incident of Isra wal Mi'raj, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes from Makkah Mukarramah to Jerusalem, and he prays. Not only just he prays in that masjid, in that sanctuary, but he leads all the prophets in prayer. And that shows the significance. And I talked about that in detail in the Seerah class, so you can refer back to that for the details, inshallah. But the Prophet ﷺ, he went there, and then from there, he went up to the heavens. Okay, he went up to the heavens from, some say, the ulama say from Qubbat al-Sakhra. The Qubbat al-Sakhra is the dome of the rock, and there's a rock that's inside of there, a huge boulder. They say it's from there. That rock is actually mentioned in, it's referred to in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when a caller will call, يَوْمَ يُنَادِ مُنَادٍ مِن مَكَانٍ قَرِيبٍ, when a caller will call out from a nearby place. And the ulama mention that this is referring to that rock, the dome of the rock, and that rock, the Sakhra, and that the Israfil alayhi salam, when he blows the trumpet for the second time, he will be from that area. He will be on that rock, basically, and that's where the people will rise up on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So we have that. Then we know that Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anhu conquers Jerusalem without any bloodshed. They actually practically hand over the keys to the leader of the Muslims, and that's a very beautiful, detailed story. We don't have time to go into that, inshallah, right now. But Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anhu does that. He prays in the Qibali Masjid, in the Qibla side of the Masjid, and he goes to the area where the garbage dump had been placed, and he started with his own hands, starts to clean that area with his robe, with his thobe, starts taking the garbage and dumping it to the side, and then the people followed suit, the Muslims and the non-Muslims, whoever was living there, the Christians were living there, they started following suit. They helped the Umar radhiallahu anhu clean the area. So that's another significant thing. Inshallah, we can talk about that some other time in detail. Now the future, that's what happened in the past. Now we know in current times what's going on with Jerusalem, for example. All the political, I'm not going to go into detail, but all the political aspect of that, and they're trying to rebuild Sulaiman alayhi salam's temple, and they're trying to reclaim that area and all not and whatnot. And we know that in the future, this area, the Sham area, and Bayt al-Maqdis in particular, has a very important part or significant part in the future, where Dajjal will try to conquer the area, but he's not going to be able to enter into the Haram. We know that Imam Mahdi alayhi salam or radiyallahu anhu, he will come to that area, and there's some riwayat, inshallah, I think that riwayah is in this collection, where Imam Mahdi will be praying the Fajr prayer in this masjid in Bayt al-Maqdis, and Isa alayhi salam will come down, and Mahdi will lead Isa alayhi salam in prayer, and then after that Isa alayhi salam will kill Dajjal, and we know what's going to happen after that. And they say, the ulama say that the Khilafah or the Khilafah of Isa alayhi salam basically will be based in Jerusalem, based in that area in Masjid al-Aqsa. So again, there's a lot of things, and we're not going to do this inshallah in 10 days. The next 10 days we'll be going over this inshallah and try to finish these 40 hadith. Very beautiful things. For example, here also Lut alayhi salam in this Surah Al-Anbiya, ayah number 71, where Allah subhanahu says, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That we have delivered, we had saved Ibrahim alayhi salam and Lut alayhi salam, his nephew Lut alayhi salam, from Iraq to the land of Quds, Quds, and that we have blessed for all people. So we know Ibrahim alayhi salam and Lut alayhi salam, they had made hijrah from Iraq, they went to the area of Quds. So we'll start inshallah. One other thing to mention is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hajj, ayah number 32, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. That the sha'air of Allah, the symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who have love of those symbols and they honor those symbols and they have, revere those symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is from the taqwa al-qulub, that is from the taqwa, the piety of the hearts. So again, Baytul Maqdis is one of those places that is revered by all Muslims, and if we do that, that will show our taqwa and our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first hadith inshallah we're going to go over, and inshallah I'm going to try to limit these sessions to 20 minutes, inshallah, hopefully maybe give or take 5 minutes. I won't go over that inshallah. The two oldest masjids on earth. So first of all, we know that the first masjid on earth, what is that? And we talked about this in Seerah class. Masjid al-Haram in Makkah Mukarramah. Okay, so that's the first masjid, and who built that? Ibrahim alayhi salam with his son. Which son? Ismail alayhi salam. Okay, and the second masjid of Islam is what? Masjid Quba? Okay, that's good. Masjid of Islam, of the Prophet ﷺ. But the second masjid of all the world is what? Masjid al-Aqsa. Okay, Baytul Maqdis is actually the second, and it was built 40 years after the foundations of the Kaaba. So after Ibrahim alayhi salam built the Kaaba in Makkah Mukarramah, 40 years after that he built Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem with his other son Ishaq alayhi salatu salam. So this first hadith inshallah, عن أبي ذر رضي الله عنه قال قلت يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أي مسجد وضع أول. I asked the Prophet ﷺ which of the masjids were placed first on earth. قال المسجد الحرام قلت ثم أي. So the Prophet ﷺ said the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca. Then he said, then which? Then he said قال ثم المسجد الأقصى. Then Masjid al-Aqsa. قلت كم كان بينهما. How much was the time between, the period in between? قال 40. ثم قال حيثما أدركتك الصلاة فصل والأرض لك مسجد. So the Prophet ﷺ says in this hadith that whenever a time of prayer comes, the time of salah comes, then you should pray, and the whole earth is a masjid for you. So these are the first masjids that were built, but in fact the whole earth is a masjid for us. So that this hadith we learned that there was 40 years in between the building of Masjid al-Haram in Mecca and Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. Second hadith inshallah. عن معقل ابن أبي معقل الأسدي رضي الله عنه قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن نستقبل القبلتين ببول أو غائط أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Ma'aqil radiallahu anh, he says that the Prophet ﷺ has warned us, prohibited us from facing the two qiblas when we are praying, when we are using the bathroom for number one or number two. Okay, so whenever we use the bathroom, whenever we're relieving ourselves, we are not supposed to face the two qiblas, both qiblas. This is Makkah Mukarramah and Jerusalem. Okay, so we know the Sahaba, and they had a lot of fakhr and they had pride in this. I believe it was Salman al-Farsi radhiallahu anhu. He was asked one time, one of the non-Muslims came to him and he said that your Prophet teaches you everything, and he says yes, he taught us everything, and he even taught us how to use the bathroom. Meaning that the Prophet ﷺ has taught us from A to Z how to live our lives. It's found in the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, in this hadith, we are not supposed to face the qiblatain, both qiblas. And there was a hadith where the Sahaba, when they went to Sham, they found that the bathrooms were facing the qibla, so they would turn when they would use the bathroom. So they would enter in and they would turn. So sometimes if you find, gas station, or even if you build buy a house or something, and you see the qibla is facing the, you should make sure of that beforehand. But just say if it's facing the qiblas, then you should try to turn away from that, inshallah ta'ala. Third hadith inshallah. عن أبي إسحاق رضي الله عنه قال سمعت البراء رضي الله عنه يقول صلينا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نحو بيت المقدس 16 شهرا أو 17 شهرا ثم صرفنا نحو الكعبة. So this hadith tells us where the Prophet ﷺ, and the Sahaba, they prayed towards, and there's different riwayat. So this one says 16 or 17. Some riwayat say 16 to 18. So basically 16 to 18 months the Muslims prayed towards Baytul Maqdis. So you probably heard this, the first Qibla of Islam. The first Qibla of Islam is actually not the Kaaba. The first Qibla of Islam is Jerusalem. And what that means is, we had Nawafil, so the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were praying Nawafil before Isra wal Mi'raj, but during the night journey of Isra wal Mi'raj, that's where they were given the 5 daily prayers, the Fard prayers, and they were they were commanded to face Jerusalem, Bayt al-Maqdis, okay? So that was the Qibla of that time, that was the first Qibla of Islam. Then 16 to 18 months later, the Muslims, even after they had moved to Medina Munawwara, they changed the Qibla. The Qibla was changed back to the Kaaba. Now in hadith, this hadith number 4, عن البراء رضي الله عنه, he says صلينا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نحو بيت المقدس 18 شهرا, so 18 months. وصرفت القبلة إلى الكعبة بعد دخوله إلى المدينة. So بشهرين. So after 2 months after the Prophet ﷺ entered into Medina Munawwara, after he made hijrah to Medina Munawwara, the Qibla was changed. And we just got done with the hijrah in the Seerah class, and inshallah we'll be talking about the tahweel of the Qibla inshallah soon. So after 2 months, the tahwil of Qibla, and وكان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا صلى إلى بيت المقدس أكثر تقلب وجهه في السماء وعلم الله من قلب نبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه يهوى الكعبة فصعد جبريل فجعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يتبعه بصره وهو يسعد بين السماء والأرض ينظر ما يأتيه به فأنزل الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قد نرى تقلب وجهك في السماء. So basically the hadith is talking about 16 to 18 months they prayed towards Baytul Maqdis, and after that before this, so the Prophet ﷺ, while he was in Makkah Mukarramah, he remember the extreme love the Muslims had for the Kaaba. They were born in Makkah, they lived around the Kaaba, they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards facing the Kaaba. Like I said, Nawafil before the Fard prayers, and they had this love in their hearts. Now, the Prophet ﷺ himself, it's reported that when he would pray towards Bayt al-Maqdis, he would stand on the Yemeni corner, so the southern corner of the Kaaba, and that way he would be facing the Kaaba and facing Jerusalem both. So he does not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he also gets to pray towards the Kaaba. Now after the Prophet ﷺ had made hijrah to Medina Munawwara, he was no longer to stand behind the Kaaba anymore, so he was facing purely to Jerusalem. And he had this longing to face back to the Kaaba again, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that from his heart that he wanted to, and he would start in prayer. The Prophet ﷺ would be looking up to the heavens, waiting for Jibreel ﷺ to come down with the ayat. And one such day, Jibreel ﷺ was coming down, and Rasulullah ﷺ was following Jibreel, looking at Jibreel ﷺ coming down and following him to see what he had brought, what ayat he had brought. And that was when Surah Al-Baqarah ayah number 144 was revealed, and that was the tahweel of the Kaaba was revealed. The Prophet ﷺ, he would ask Jibreel ﷺ before that was revealed, he would ask him continuously and ask him frequently, Ya Jibreel, kayfa haluna fi salatina ila Bayt al-Maqdis. He would ask, like, what about our this is after the ayah was revealed, that the Prophet ﷺ said that what about our prayer? What happened to those prayers, the 16, 18 months that we prayed towards Jerusalem? And then the next ayah was revealed, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. So salah in this ayah is referred to as iman, that it will not go to waste. So whatever you prayed, the salawat that you prayed towards Jerusalem will not go to waste, and that will be reserved in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now this hadith, again, talking about the tahweel of the Kaaba, we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he was in a certain masjid. What's the name of the masjid? Anybody know what's the name of the masjid that he was praying in? Masjid Quba. Okay, that's one of the opinions. And there's another opinion. Actually, there's a masjid called Masjid Qiblatain. It's called Masjid Qiblatain. And
after that Qiblatain, but there's other name before that.
For that masjid?
Qiblatain is called after when they changed the Qibla.
Yes, Barakallah fi. Yeah, so the masajid were named after the tribes that were living in that area. I don't remember the name of the tribe that was living in the area, but it was named that first, and then it was called Masjid Qiblatain after that, because that was where the Prophet ﷺ was praying in. He was visiting, I think there was a sick person from that tribe. One of the Sahaba was sick. The Prophet ﷺ was visiting him, and while they were praying Dhuhr prayer, in the middle of the prayer, so they were praying 4 rak'ah of Dhuhr prayer, and in the middle of the prayer, the ayat were revealed to change the Qibla. And if you go to Masjid Qiblatain, there's actually on the opposite side of the Qibla, you'll see like a small place. They had the ayah and they had different stuff before, but they kind of changed it now. But there's a small mark they still have there, showing where the Qibla used to be. And one thing to note here is that this is called Masjid Qiblatain specifically, but all the masajid that were built within that 2-month period were actually Qiblatain, had 2 Qiblas. Even Masjid Nabawi had 2 Qiblas. Because Masjid Nabawi, when the Prophet ﷺ came and they built, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit, inshallah, today and next week, what the Prophet says, not today, next week, inshallah, where the Prophet ﷺ builds the Masjid Nabawi. And Masjid Nabawi was built actually facing Jerusalem first. So the Qibla was towards Jerusalem, and then it was changed after 2 months. So all the masajid that were built before 2 months period in Medina Munawwara were actually Masjid Qibla. They were all Qiblatain. But this one is specifically called Qiblatain because that's where the Prophet ﷺ was praying in, and then the tahweel of the Qibla took place. So that's one of the significant parts of that, inshallah. Let me just read one more hadith, inshallah, and we'll end. عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن لي حوضا ما بين الكعبة وبيت المقدس أبيض مثل اللبن آنيته عدد النجوم وإني لأكثر الأنبياء تبعا يوم القيامة أو كما قال عليه وسلم. So the Prophet says that I have the hawd. The hawd is the hawd Qawthar. This is ma bayn al-Kaaba wa Bayt al-Maqdis. So this will be between the Kaaba and the Bayt al-Maqdis, that area. That's the size of Hawd al-Kawthar on the Day of Judgment. That will be the size of that Hawd al-Kawthar on the Day of Judgment. It is white, abiyad mithla laban, like the whiteness of milk. Aniyatuhu adad al-nujum, and the vessels of this of Hawd is like the number of the nujum, or the number of the stars. وَإِنِّي لَأَكْثَرُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ تَبَعًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and I will have the most followers of all the Anbiya on the Day of Judgment. So this is talking about the Hawd of Kawthar, and again it is the size of the distance between Baytul Haram in Makkah Mukarramah and Baytul Aqsa, Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. So inshallah we'll stop there, and we'll continue doing these hadith. There's a lot of significance. There's one section actually talks about all the different Anbiya and their relationship to Bayt al-Maqdis. Then it comes at the end, it comes to the future, talking about Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, and talking about Isa alayhi salam, inshallah. So we'll continue, and we'll try to finish this whole collection before Eid, inshallah ta'ala. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Inshallah we'll have our seerah session after Asr today. Okay, so that we'll have after Asr we'll have the seerah session, and that again will be about 20 minutes long, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.